Will a recession cause a housing market crash in Orlando? At the time of this recording, whether we're in a recession or not is debatable. But regardless, with inflation on the rise and an unpredictable housing market, what does the future hold for the Orlando real estate market? Let's talk about it. First, let's talk about the history of recessions and how it relates to the housing market crash. 8 out of the last 10 recessions before the Great Recession were preceded by a downturn in the housing market. So historically, they go hand in hand. Now, there are some differences between now and the 2008 crash. For instance, subprime mortgages. The mortgages and the way that they're awarded nowadays are a lot different than what it was back then. Back then, it was sort of the Wild West. It felt like almost anybody could get a mortgage. Mortgage companies weren't really verifying income and all that kind of stuff. It was pretty wild out there. Nowadays, if you've gotten a mortgage recently, you know that it's a lot more difficult. The amount of equity that people have in their home is also a lot different than what it was back then. Especially people who have owned a home for a while, and because there has been quite a bit of appreciation recently, they just have more equity than they did back then. Also, the unemployment rate isn't as low as it was back in 2008. That doesn't mean that it won't change, because there are definitely some layoffs that I'm hearing about, but so far the unemployment rate isn't as bad as it was before. How a recession affects Orlando more than other places is due to our tourism economy. So we see a hit quicker than others, because basically if something happens, you lose your job, or things are getting more expensive, one of the first things to go is your vacation, unfortunately, right? Now that affects Orlando because we're a major vacation destination. And when there are things like that happening, it really affects our tourism industry, and jobs are at risk. I have family that they work in the hotel industry and have definitely experienced layoffs and furloughs, all that kind of stuff. And, we have a relatively volatile economy next to other places. Now, I will say that our economy is a little bit different than what it looked like in 2008. We are getting more jobs here that just aren't based on the tourism industry. However, it's still a major tourist destination. If tourism is affected, Orlando is definitely going to see a hit, and there will be people who unfortunately lose their job. Let's talk about the current state of the Orlando housing market. There's still lots of demand here. Now, you might be hearing in the news that housing prices are going down, sellers are reducing their price, all that kind of stuff. And that's absolutely happening here in Orlando, but maybe not as much as it is in other places. Inventory is still low. We're at about a 2-month inventory. A balanced market is 6 months. Now, to be clear, we haven't had a 6-month inventory in a long time. About 3 years ago, our inventory was about 3 to 4 months. And even then, it was still a pretty competitive market, just nothing like what we saw, a year ago, for instance. Currently, many people have a large amount of equity. So that might mean that they may not have to foreclose on their home. If something happens, they lose their job, they might be able to refinance, take some equity out, pay some bills, and stay afloat until they can get another job. Now, you may hear some reports about foreclosures being on the rise, and that's absolutely true, but we do have to keep in mind that there has been moratoriums, and so that has made it so you couldn't foreclose on anyone. So now that all those have been lifted, we're definitely seeing foreclosures, but they're pretty low. And Orlando foreclosures happen to be a bit lower than the national average. Now, as far as new construction goes, there's still a lot of new construction that's in the works here in Orlando. There's lots of communities that are being built, and there are some that are getting announced. It seems like almost every week there's an announcement of a new community that's coming to the Central Florida area. And although the new construction market has softened a little bit, it's still pretty active, and new construction being built is a sign of a healthy market. Once we see the builders kind of course correcting and not building anymore, then that can be a major red flag that there could be an issue coming up. But so far, we haven't really seen that. Now, with all that being said, there's definitely a shift happening in the Orlando market, but I don't see major signs of a crash just yet. What do you think? Will there be a housing market crash in Orlando? Let us know in the comments. If you're enjoying the video so far, a like and comment go a long way to help out my channel. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and if you are a subscriber, I really appreciate your support. Now let's talk about the future of real estate in Orlando and how a recession would affect Orlando's housing market. So if their unemployment rises, that could cause foreclosures, right? Because people can't pay their mortgage. A recession could also make it harder to keep up with the rapid rise of costs to keep a home. It seems like, companies, when they're trying to stay afloat, they're having hard times, they might charge more money for services. And you think it would get cheaper, but they charge more money to make up for the lost revenue. I think there are some people that may not have a lot of equity in their home, especially if they're a newer buyer or if the housing prices drop significantly. That could affect the amount of equity you have on your home and potentially being underwater on your mortgage. Now, this is what I think about a housing market crash here in Orlando. And obviously what I'm going to say is based on, some data and just experience of being a real estate agent here in Orlando. And some of it is going to be just kind of guessing and predicting and theorizing. And with the market changing as fast as it is, I could absolutely be wrong, but you never know. It seems like Orlando is in kind of like a bubble, and not a housing bubble. It just seems like other places are really seeing a change in the housing market, and we haven't really seen that yet. Now, are we just seeing kind of maybe a delayed effect or something like that? Could Orlando, our housing market, just see a major turn soon? That's possible. There are other places near Orlando that are seeing a downturn in the market, like the Villages and Tampa. I'm not seeing major signs of a housing market crash here in Orlando, but I do see a housing correction coming. Check out this video for more information on that, or this playlist for more videos like this. Reach out if you have any questions. My contact information is in the description below. Thanks for watching.